My name is Marilyn Newdorf, and I came out in 1972. My last 2 years of high school were spent in a Mennonite residential school. So there was like 60 young women, all of us living together. My hormones were raging, and it was not a good place for me to be at all. I graduated with a 55 average, and it's not because I'm stupid. I was just so emotionally distraught, and there was nobody I could talk to. I couldn't talk to the minister. I couldn't talk to the local doctor. I couldn't talk to the Christian teachers. So I felt like this. I had this Bible, thumping around on my sexuality. Had broken off my engagement because something did not feel right for me. And one evening when I came home from my late shift, I turned on the TV to unwind, and there was Bruce Garman talking about the newfound Zodiac Society, which was for the homosexuals in Saskatoon. And I ran to write that phone number down and phoned it for weeks on end. This was the days before the answering machines. Finally got connected with a woman, and so I think she took me down to the Ritz for a drink. And so I met a few other gays and lesbians, or we called ourselves homosexuals mostly in those days. And shortly after that very fall, there was some sort of a prairie conference where people from Winnipeg and Regina and Calgary and Edmonton came to Saskatoon for a gathering just to be able to support one another and talk about what was happening in their own communities, how they were developing, etc. And oh my goodness, was it ever exciting. There must have been at least 12 lesbians there, if not 15. And more men, of course. It was a great fun anyway, that event. It was a good fit right off the bat. In terms of me, I grew up Mennonite, and so it was not a good fit in terms of what I had learned growing up at all. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done in my life, and still to this day consider it one of the hardest things I've ever done, to come out to myself. Because of course I learned that I was going to go to hell, but it felt true to me. Within 6 months, Mom asked, so was that women's group that you keep talking about, are they homosexuals? And so I acknowledged that it was. And until then, I'd had a good friendship with Mom. There wasn't very much that I couldn't talk to her about. But after that changed our relationship for the rest of our lives. She never did accept me as a lesbian. In fact, none of my family did. Well, I have 21 family members, immediate family members. And of the 11 nieces and nephews, 2 of them find that I'm okay. I remember my mom saying, well, couldn't you just be a missionary instead, go overseas? And I thought that'd be hypocritical. I said that too. And then it was like, well, just don't be in relationship then. Those kinds of comments. And after a 5-year relationship ended, I told Mom about it, and she said, well, maybe now you can straighten your life out. This was after I'd come out like at least 7 years, if not eight years. So it really hurt that she wasn't able to support me emotionally through that very difficult time. But in those days, and when I first came out, and there was no community center, there was no place to go. We would hang out at the Ritz, the bar down on 1st Avenue and 21st Street, the corner of 1st Avenue, in the Apollo Room. And us and the university students would hang out there because we were accepted. We didn't get harassed and hassled. We were welcomed, so we hung out there. And had been house parties for a while before I came out. It wasn't too long after I came out that we rented a little apartment, really, above Layer's Shoes and on 2nd Avenue. It was upstairs. We used the kitchen as a bar. And every Saturday night, that was pretty much where you would see me dancing and, just having conversations. I remember there was, it was just an apartment, so every once in a while there'd be a hole in the plaster wall. And generally speaking, it wasn't the men who put that there. That was one jealous woman. I was in a relationship fairly shortly after I came out. About 6 months after I came out, I ended up in a very nice relationship. that lasted just over 2 years. And that woman was particularly close to her mother. So her mother invited me to live with them. And I was treated wonderfully as one of the family members. And I remember my parents judging them because how could they, invite me in to live with my partner at the time. Partner, that wasn't the thing to have. Anyway, woman, partner. It was a wonderful experience for me coming from the Mennonite culture into a home where I was totally accepted. That lasted for 2 years, and then I don't know how long after that I ended up with a woman. It was not a good relationship for me, and that lasted for 5 years. Sometimes on a Saturday night when I went out to the community center, there'd be some fellow or occasionally a woman who would come in with a black and blue face because somebody had recognized them for being who they are, and they got beaten up. And I remember one time where our event closed a little bit later than the event that was happening at the community center downstairs for the different organization, and they didn't want it to end, and we ended up getting beat up en masse. I remember giving a statement to the police, and they didn't really do anything in those days. It was they were going through the motions. Really, that's what it felt like. I think it was still in the mid-70s where we sent thick documents to the federal and the provincial governments saying, you need to change the legislation to include us and the human rights thing. I remember one time a bunch of us drove down to support the Regina community, and they were having a march. And we marched, it was for the LGBTQ2 issues at that time. It would have been the early 80s, I think. I remember seeing cameras, at various places that sometimes we would walk past a bush or whatever, and there'd be somebody with a camera. Or I remember seeing on top of a building, there was a camera. So I know I'm in the CSIS files, or maybe they've been purged by now, but all of us were in the whole march were photographed in those days. But I remember other people in my community having trouble with the government. I remember a woman who even had her mail opened and had all kinds of problems with the police. So I remember when I moved to Ottawa in 1988, I was very excited about moving to Ontario because they had changed their provincial legislation to include sexual orientation. So I knew that I wasn't going to be kicked out of a job or kicked out of an apartment if they found out that I was lesbian. I still believe in God, and I feel that what God really appreciates is to be true to ourselves and to be more our true selves. And so I feel that having come out was an absolutely wonderful thing for me to do, for me personally and for me spiritually as well. Marilyn is having a good life right now. I love the Wednesday Coffee Row is such a heaven sent for me, and the lesbian book club that I organized only meets once a month, but it's really major. Those are my chosen family. Those are the people who know me. And my chosen community is so important to me.